We also have a special treat as well. We have his father, Brother Asghar Shah. Uncle is right there. Can you stand up? This brother, mashallah, was one of the ones that helped get the land for the mosque that we're staying in right now. Can I get a takbir? Allahu Akbar. Takbir! Takbir! So even those that do not know Jawad have heard stories of Jawad and his legacy, either in halakas, on the basketball courts, even in the nearby high school. Some might say even, I'm like Jawad. I went to high school at Fort Richmond Collegiate. Jawad went to high school Fort Richmond Collegiate. Jawad played basketball there. I played basketball there. Jawad became a neurosurgeon. Okay, let's just stop right there. But this is a living testimony of the profound impact on one individual has on a community. Brother Jawad, his story is a testimony of the idea of greatness extends beyond the professional success. It is rooted on deep commitment to service and compassion. Even in his youth, he was the spearhead that began the Muslim Youth Council, MYC, and sure other councils became other names afterwards. He was also involved in the MSA, Muslim Student Association, just nearby at U of M, organizing various activities, brought out all the community events together, and it's sometimes even bigger than what MIA used to be. Then he transitioned seamlessly into a distinguished medical career. He continued to inspire by spearheading the Peace Village Clinic downtown on Ellis, alongside Triple IM, which was known as Islamic Information Institute of Manitoba, just after a year after 9/11. And the reason I remember that, because I even remember Dr. Jundi. Is Dr. Jundi here? He's here. He stitched my face at that clinic after a basketball tournament. So a lot of impact there. Even now, Brother Jawad is still impactful as he's working throughout in Minna, the Muslim Youth of North America. His sponsorship even goes beyond in involving Islamic institutions in MIFTA in the States and working with all types of marginalized youth, and is showcasing his dedication beyond the walls of just a hospital. Of course, professionally, we can talk about how he studied at the University of Manitoba, McGill University, specializing in neurosurgery and all the other domains. But what's most impressive, he had the vision and led the beginning and was a founder of a massive medical institution called Insight, not only in Michigan, but now also in Chicago. Today, we're here to listen to his insight as he'll share on the centrality of Muhammadan ideals regarding the Prophet, peace be upon him, and our lives. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Brother Jawad Shah back home. That is a home that is forever grateful, and for the threads of generosity and compassion that he has woven into the community here in this fabric. Jazakallah khair. Do you want to use this mic?
I think this is better. Yeah, this will be better. Jazakumullah khair ya Seth. Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. It's really bizarre actually to be here. It's because I know part of the architecture of the community, and I drove around a little bit to see where I grew up and so on. But at the same time, I'm amazed at how big the community has gotten, the new faces, the new energy. And of course, we're all being attracted by the same thing, by the idea of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by the idea of, serving our deen. And so when it comes to my thoughts, and this is something where, you want me to use this? Sorry. No, it's okay. It's just on my headset. And then this one should give this to you. Yeah. Okay. Does that work better? Like this? Okay. Okay, is that better? Does that sound better? Okay. There you go. Does that sound better? Okay. So yeah, so it's very interesting to be back and remembering all those times and so on. I recall I was saying to the brothers that at the Saint Vital Masjid, now called the Pioneer Masjid, me and two of my friends, we used to break in to do Salatul Jummah. I remember I was in grade 8. There wasn't a regular Jummah, so we used to create and then get inside. There's a lot of Jamaat, the Tabligh brothers, they would come all the time. I couldn't, my Arabic was very poor, so they're teaching me Surah Al-Asr. And they said, "What's the capital of Canada?" I said, "Ottawa." They said, "Watawa." Watawa Sawb al-Sabr. So, again, I have fond memories and so on. So I wanted to speak a little bit today about the topic in perhaps a little bit non-intuitive way. And I begin with a hadith of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that's mentioned in Ibn Majah, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "As-salah mi'rajul mu'min," that the prayer is the ascent of the believer. The believer's soul and spirit ascends. I want to touch a little bit on what I believe this really means. There's a statement in Madarij al-Salikin, and this is mentioned in many, many books, in which the scholars, they come to this one sentence, and you can find it in multiple books, where they say that ad-deen kulluhu khuluq, that this religion, if you want to talk about the principles of this religion, that the principle of this religion is that this entire deen is nothing more than to perfect character. Nothing else. Everything we're taught, every rule of fiqh, every rule of sharia, every element of tazkiyah is for nothing more than to perfect the character of the human being. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, "Innama bu'ithtu li'utammima makarim al-akhlaq," that I was sent for nothing more than to perfect human character. The word innama, Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, he explains this, is made of two parts actually. Inna lit ta'kid, like we are affirming something, and ma lit nafi, that we're disaffirming something. So when you say innama, it means to the exclusion of all else. Not that I was sent to perfect character, I was sent for nothing else except to perfect character, the beauty of the human being. What's inside a human being is their character, it's their nature. And this transformation of the nature is the struggle of the human life. You spend an entire life perfecting character, and you ascend as in your spirit as you become better and better and better in your character. You practice good character, and it's an act until finally your soul is transformed, as Imam Ibn al-Qayyim talks about, that the hal, the situation you're in, is now transformed until it becomes a maqam. You act patient, you act nice, you act generous until you become nice, until you become generous. It's a natural element of who you are. So when we talk about khuluq, we talk about the internal nature of a human being. But there's another statement in the books of Tazkiyah that you'll also find hidden within those beautiful pages of our scholars, in which they'll say, "Wal khuluq kulluhu adab." If all of this religion is character, then all of character is etiquette. It's your interaction with the outside world. What you have inside you has to come out. And how you interact with nature and inanimate objects, how you interact with children and parents and friends and brothers and sisters and shuyukh and ulama and friends and enemies. This is your adab now. And your adab is going to come out through your character. So if you study adab in the Quran, that you will find different ways in which we are taught how to interact. But the most beautiful thing you'll find in the Quran, I find, is the adab of the Anbiya towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What was the etiquette and behaviors of prophets to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the idea that the prophets were also growing in who they were. One interpretation, Surah Al Akhiratu khayrun lak min al ula, speaking to our Prophet ﷺ, was that every moment of time for you, Ya Rasulullah, the next moment was more beautiful than this moment. In other words, you grew and you grew and you grew. And our Prophet was directed, Addabani Rabbi fa ahsana ta'dibi. That Allah, He's the one who gave me etiquette, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, and He gave me the most excellent form of behaviors and etiquette. Our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam continued to grow, and that's how much and the love Allah had for him subhanahu wa ta'ala is manifest throughout the Quran. There's an interesting oath in the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking about the city of Mecca. He says, "La uqsimu bihadha al-balad." He says, and the Mufassirin have two interpretations of this. La uqsimu bihadha al-balad, I swear by this city of Mecca, meaning to say the la is for ta'keed, it's for emphasis, and because this is such a holy city, I swear by this city, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. The other set of Mufassirin say, no, it's la, meaning I don't swear by this city. La uqsimu bihadha al-balad, I don't swear by this city. And how do you reconcile two exactly opposite interpretations? You reconcile by reading the next verse. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد. That you, Ya Rasulullah, you walk in these streets. I don't swear by Mecca. I swear by Mecca because you walk in these streets. I don't swear by Mecca except for the fact that you walk in these streets. And when you go to Medina, I swear by that city. لا أقسم بهذا البلد وأنت حل بهذا البلد. So the character even of our Prophet would continue to thrive and to grow. So what is the adab that's unveiled to us in the Quran, the Anbiya, and how did they deal with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It's really an unbelievable journey. I give you an example. In Surah Yusuf, you see Rasulullah, our Rasul, Sayyidina Yusuf, how much he suffered through his life, thrown into a well by his brothers. It gives me great comfort that many of the Anbiya had jacked up families, okay? My dad's here, so I won't say anything about our family. But the idea that they had difficult times now. It's one thing for your brother to get into a fight with you. It's another thing for your brother, you know what I mean? Like give me to take Jad and throw him in a well and say bye, right? It's a big deal. So he's thrown in a well. He's sold into slavery. He lives a life where he's essentially a slave. He's thrown into jail for unjust terms. He goes there, and his family now comes back to him. He spends 40 years like this. This is 4 decades of his life. And now comes the time for him to explain what happened. What does he say? وَقَدْ أَحْسَنَ اللَّهُ بِي. That Allah dealt with me with the most excellence. أحسن الله بي إذ جاء إذ جاءني من إذ جاء وقد أحسن بي إذ جاءني وقد أحسن بي إذ جاء وإذ أخرجني من السجن وجاءكم من البدو من بعد أن نزغ الشيطان بيني وبين إخوتي. That he said that Allah dealt with me in the most excellent way. He brought no negativity to his life and the problems and the difficulties in his life, because he knew that every moment increased his character in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he said, this was the most excellent thing that happened to me. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala got me out of the prison. So even as they say that being in prison, he didn't ascribe to Allah, though there was good in it for him. This is when Allah got me out of prison. This is the beauty of what He did for me, and He brought you out of the desert and brought you to me. This is the beauty that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how He treated me in His life. You see the way and the etiquette of a prophet when he speaks to and about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If you look at Sayyidina Isa in Surah Ma'idah, how does he speak about Allah when Allah challenges him? It says, did you tell these people to worship you and your mother? So now he's in trouble. He, like any human being, is being asked, did he fulfill his responsibility? The prophets, they say, are going to be asked, and they need witnesses to prove that they did what they had to do. وَإِذْ أَخَذْنَا مِنَ النَّبِيِّينَ مِيثَاقَهُمْ وَمِنْكَ وَمِن نُوحٍ وَإِبْرَاهِيمَ وَمُوسَى وَعِيسَى ابْنِ مَرْيَمَ وَأَخَذْنَا مِنْهُمْ مِيثَاقًا غَلِيظًا. That we took an oath from these prophets, the ulul azm, that are you going to teach people? And one of the interpretations of the next verse, لِيَسْأَلَ الصَّادِقِينَ عَنْ صِدْقِهِمْ, that we are going to ask the truthful from their ummahs, did they follow the way? Did they respond to Allah's message in the sense that they delivered it now to the people? And you remember our Prophet, what he said as he was ending his life, he said to the people, to the Sahaba, هَلْ بَلَّغْتَ, did I give you the message? And then when they said yes, he said, Ya Allah, fashhad alayhim, bear witness that I fulfilled my responsibility. So the prophets themselves now are going to be asked. And so Sayyidina Isa comes in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he's challenged, and he says, and he starts speaking now from the beauty of his character to protect those people that were deviant. He said, إِن تُعَذِّبْهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ عِبَادُكَ Ya Allah, that if you punish them, then they're your servants. You have every right to do that, Ya Allah. I'm not taking anything away from your majesty. إِن تُعَذِّبْهُمْ فَإِنَّهُمْ عِبَادُكَ وَإِن تَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ فَإِنَّكَ أَنْتَ الْعَزِيزُ الْحَكِيمُ. And if you forgive them, then you are exalted, you are wise, you are great. You notice how a prophet speaks. He doesn't say that if you punish them, Ya Allah, it's your right, and if you forgive them, you're the most forgiving. Because if Allah chooses to punish them, is He not the most forgiving? He uses the words Al-Aziz Al-Hakim for a reason. That if you do this action, Ya Allah, you are the one who has the right and exalted and wise, and you can make that decision, and I accept it, Ya Allah. I'm your servant, I'm standing here bowing before you. And if you choose to forgive them, you are exalted and you're wise. There's no change in His majesty. This is how a prophet speaks. So I want to give you further insight, perhaps, into this concept of the adab of a prophet. It's mentioned in Sahih al-Bukhari that Sayyidina Musa was asked, and remember, this question had to have been asked at a point in time where his prophet was established. He was able now to move. He was asked, who is the most knowledgeable person on earth? Who is the most knowledgeable? He said, I am. He was ulul azm of the prophets. He was a man who was given the risala by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to deliver to Bani Israel. He wasn't arrogant. There wasn't any arrogance. That's his responsibility. I'm a prophet. I'm the one you must come to for this. But the way he answered the question was something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instructed him and said, there's someone who knows in some areas they have knowledge that you don't have. That's what Sayyidina Musa was told. And what did he say? He said, I'm going to travel the earth. I will travel for 80 years. They say, Huquba, for 80 years I'm going to travel. He just started traveling, looking for signs, looking for some way to find some answers wherever he could. Where is this man? Where am I going to learn? And he finally finds and comes to this man. So the Quran is super interesting in how it describes this moment. It says, فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِّنْ عِبَادِنَا آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِّنْ عِنْدِنَا وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِن لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا. That he traveled the earth and he came to this idea, فَوَجَدَ, that he found. And the people of Tasawwuf, of Tazkiyah, they say this is the word which instigates the idea of wajid, that tingle that goes inside you when you find some true knowledge that affects your hearts. فَوَجَدَ عَبْدًا مِّنْ عِبَادِنَا, that they found a servant from among our servants. آتَيْنَاهُ رَحْمَةً مِّنْ عِنْدِنَا, he was given special mercy from the presence of Allah. وَعَلَّمْنَاهُ مِن لَدُنَّا عِلْمًا, and we gave him knowledge, special knowledge from ourselves. There is different types of knowledge. There is knowledge which comes from working hard. You struggle, you learn, you write, you read, you memorize. There's knowledge that comes now from an injection of a degree of insight that you're inspired towards. and it opens your mind to other things. There is knowledge. Imam Shatibi, he says there's only three types of knowledge. There's three forms of knowledge. One is through information, which is the vast majority of what you get. There's through observation, and there's through logic. This is how you're going to, in this world, gain knowledge. But there is another type of knowledge that comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala himself, and that's called ilm ladun. That's knowledge that Allah gives the heart, that comes from him and no one else but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses when to unveil that knowledge into someone's heart. Scholars, they debate, what was this ilm ladun that Sayyidina Musa was after? And what was it that was trying to be given to him and trying to be delivered to him? And many scholars, they say, what was that other than adab? What other than adab and etiquette and interaction, what other knowledge was it that was the ilm ladun? And this story, the following story, may shed some light on what I mean by that. Three events occur now. And the events are things which I think a prophet will understand. That a ship is lent to someone, you put a hole in a ship, and it might look bad, but maybe there's something good in it. So if your conclusion is that Musa alayhi salam was taught qadr and qada, who would have known that more than him? He's a prophet. He knows that what looks bad might be very good, and what looks good might be very bad. He knew qadr and qada. So the three stories that occur are interesting. The first the first incident is where a ship comes now. He puts a hole inside the ship, and it looks bad, and he asks Khidr that, why'd you put a hole in the ship? It doesn't belong to you, and he asks those questions. The second incident occurs that a child's life is taken and a child's life is given to a family, and he's horrified that why would you take the life of a child? It's something extremely bad. He questions that because he's a prophet. There's a sharia. To take a life is not a good thing. So he questions Khidr in that case. The third event that occurs, he goes to a town, and the town now, they're not pleasant to him, they're not good to him, and he still goes and fixes their fence, and there's something special, there's a special reason for it, but he fixes their fence. Sayyidina Musa, if you think he's being taught qadr and qada, that something looks good but it's bad, or something's bad and it's actually good, and that's what Khidr is teaching him, I don't know if that's really the answer. I don't know if that's the answer. I believe the answer is in the Quran, though, of what was actually being taught to Sayyidina Musa. And that comes now as Khidr starts to explain to Musa the true elements of each of these stories. The first story is the story of a ship having a hole being put inside the ship. And when he explains it, he uses very specific words. He says, وَأَرَدْتُ أَنْ أَعِيبَهَا, that I desire to put a hole inside of this ship. He didn't, ظاهراً, it looks something like bad. You borrow something from someone, you destroy property. He didn't want to ascribe that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He wanted to take the humble approach. He didn't want to say that Allah told me to destroy this ship. He said, Ana aradtu an aibaha. I wanted to destroy this ship because a king was going to take the ship. It's better for the people. But the bad element that looks bad, I don't want to ascribe that to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He took that humble approach. The second incident, where a life of a child is taken that was going to be trouble for the parents, and instead they're exchanged with a good life. How does he explain that? The taking of a life and the giving of a life. He said, وَأَرَدْنَا أَن يُبْدِلَهُمَا, that we desired that this change would occur. And the scholars, they say that now, instead of saying, I did this, he ascribed half of the activity to himself. I took the life. And half of the activity to Allah, and Allah gave the life. And that's why he uses the word وَأَرَدْنَا. The last incident is very interesting. That now he goes to this town, and he fixes their fence and doesn't ask for anything whatsoever. So, zahiran, it's a beautiful act of patience and good. And batinan, it's a beautiful act. He did it for the right reasons. It's good on the outside, it's good on the inside. And he's standing before a prophet. He says, وَأَرَادَ رَبُّكَ, that Ya Musa, your Lord, not even my Lord, your Lord desired this good outcome to occur, and that's why I fixed this fence. It- وَمَا فَعَلْتُهُ عَنْ أَمْرِي, I didn't do it by myself. Allah asked this to happen. Allah wanted it to happen. This was the Mashiach of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when it comes to adab, it's so beautiful how the prophets interacted, how their characters were transformed, how their lives and hearts were changed. The most famous hadith, and I'm going a little bit, maybe perhaps too much, in terms of my own thoughts, but perhaps the most famous hadith is Hadith Jibreel. And it mentions Islam and so many different elements and so on. And one of the elements it mentions is the idea of ihsan. How do you achieve this kind of excellence? And and it's defined. الإحسان أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه فإنه يراك. That's one reading, Ghaith. That's one reading. That ihsan is not being an excellent person based on outwardly issues. It's your internal that makes you excellent. That you worship Allah as if you see Him, and if you don't see Him, then He sees you. That's one reading. There's another reading that perhaps I leave you to go home and think about. The second reading the scholars talk about is أن تعبد الله كأنك تراه فإن لم تكن تراه. See the difference? That excellence is that you worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as if you see Him. وَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ, and if you can subjugate your hearts and souls that you're not a thing. فَإِن لَمْ تَكُنْ تَرَى, then you'll see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You see the difference? I don't know if I'm hitting you guys. I want you to think about it. It's not the idea of being nothing, but the idea of subjugating ourselves and reducing ourselves, our nafs, in our batin, in our hearts and our souls, and recognizing where we are in this universe, brothers and sisters. I'm not here because of myself. Allah created me. He put me here. He brought me here for a reason. I was born in Pakistan. I found my way to Winnipeg. I left for some years. I came back. I am who I am. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He created me. I'm a tiny molecule in this universe. For me to sit and be arrogant because I wear certain clothes or I do certain things, how is that possible? How is that possible? For us to think that we're something. It's not until we start to realize that we now start connecting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When we start to realize that we're here as nothing more than instruments of the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. I didn't create human beings except that they worship me. If we can achieve that level, how beautiful people we can become. There's the incident I recall of Sayyidina Jibreel, Jibreel alayhi salam, one of the great messengers among the angels, my son is named Jibreel, was a friend of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They hung around. They were boys. They chit-chatted. They joked together. They had times together. And Jibreel one day was speaking to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the heavens split open. And when they split open, an angel came, and Sayyidina Jibreel was horrified. He was trembling. He was shaking. And this massive angel came down, walked past Sayyidina Jibreel, stood in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then he looked at him and he said, "Aturidu an takuna nabiyan abdan aw nabiyan malikan?" that, Ya Rasulullah, I've been instructed to ask this question, that do you want to be a Nabi who is a servant, or do you want to be a Nabi who's a king? Sayyidina Sulaiman, he had an army of men and animals and jinn and the wind. He could control an army unlike anything seen before or after. He was a king. Ya Rasulullah, do you want to be a prophet that's a king? You want to be a prophet that's an abd? And Sayyidina Jibreel made an ishara to him saying, take the humble way, take the humble way. He says, Bal uridu an akuna nabiyyan abdan. I want to be a nabi that's a servant. I want to be a servant nabi. If you look at the life of our Prophet ﷺ, he had a room maybe 20 feet by 20 feet. His life was transparent. We learned everything about him. We learned how he brushed his teeth. We learned how he walked and how he talked. There's elements of the seerah and elements of our Prophet's life which we learn from by his actions and by his words. The majority of his life was when he didn't say anything. If you miss that part of the seerah, when our Prophet ﷺ didn't say anything, you miss so many things about our Prophet's teachings to us. Entire books should be written about the silence of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You'll never get in trouble in life by being silent. You'll get in trouble by what you say. Your silence won't bring you into trouble. So the silence of our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Just I perhaps going on a tangent, but just look at how he and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala interacted. When he said to us, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli, have you ever thought about that? That you pray the way that I pray. He didn't say, Sallu kama usalli, pray the way I pray, because who of us can achieve that level? If we can do it externally, can we internally have the focus of our Prophet when he prayed? He didn't say that. He said, Sallu kama ra'aytumuni usalli, pray like you see me pray. He didn't raise it to that threshold, that pray like I pray. And how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala respond, and how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speak to him? In Surah Al-Anfal, Allah says, فَلَمْ تَقْتُلُوهُمْ, talking to the Sahaba, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ قَتَلَهُمْ. You didn't kill them, saying to the Sahaba in war. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ قَتَلَهُمْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's the one responsible. He's the one who took their lives and killed them, the enemy. But when he now refers to Rasulullah, he said to Rasulullah, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ, that, Ya Rasulullah, you didn't throw. When you were throwing to start the war at Badr, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ. When you threw, you didn't throw when you threw. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. But Allah is the one who threw. فَلَمْ تَقْتُلُوهُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ قَتَلَهُمْ. There's no in between. But for Rasulullah, وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى. What's the difference? So these are issues which people lose their aqidah over, right? In terms of discussing this fine point. But for me, the best tafsir of this is in Urdu, where the Mufassir, he said, Zat do hai. Right? So in other words, there's two different entities, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Prophet. Lekin baat ek hai. But there's only one story. There's only one history. It's a combined love of our Prophet and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So our Prophet, his interactions with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are so beautiful. So in this story now, I hope you're starting to see the idea of what adab is. Adab, the etiquette of prophets towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So I go back to the beginning where I mentioned the hadith in Ibn Majah. And what is our salah? What is our salah? Our salah contains every act of ibadah. Takbiratul ihram, niyatul fardiyya, niyatul nafliyya, right? You're doing your thana, al-fatiha. You have Quran in your salah. You have tahmeed and tasbih. You have dhikr. You have salawat ala nabi. You have taslim. Every single type of worship you have fasting, you can't talk, you can't eat during your salah. All of the different elements of every element of worship is mixed within our salah. And where did we get our salah? And what is it? What is it other than teaching us adab towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? When our Prophet ascended now to the heavens, he went with Sayyidina Jibreel all the way to Sidratil Muntaha. And as he crosses that threshold and he leaves Jibreel behind, and Sidratil Muntaha, Ibn Kathir says it's like golden, it's a massive tree with golden leaves. The angels came from Mala al-A'la to see who is this Prophet in our realm. And they came and sat on all of these leaves. And our Prophet left the realm. He went to a place where there is no place. He went to a time in which there was no time. And he had some interaction with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wouldn't you like to know what happened next? The Sahaba asked, did you see Allah? He said, Ra'aytun nur, I saw it in light. And there's a difference of opinion among the Sahaba about what he saw and what it meant to see in that realm. At that time was revealed 2 ayat of the Quran. At the end of Surah Al-Baqarah, this was revealed at that time. آمن الرسول بما أنزل إليه من ربه والمؤمنون. Those 2 ayat were revealed at that time. Now, in Surah Al-Najm, it mentions what happened next. When he went to Siddat al-Muntaha, the next verse says, مَا زَاغَ الْبَصَرَ وَمَا طَغَى, that his eyes didn't flitter towards the dunya or the hereafter. His focus was totally on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah is praising him that he didn't think about the dunya and everything that was going on there. Allahu Akbar. And he didn't think about Mala'ul A'la and the Jinan and the gardens of paradise and what he saw in Mala'ul A'la and the prophets and the angels that he saw. But he was totally and absolutely focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Brothers and sisters, that's the gift that our Prophet gave to us, the Salah. That now we are in that same moment, in that same ascension, that same mi'raj. That's what we're doing every day, 5 times a day. As-salah mi'raj al-mu'min. You're standing up and you're facing Allah with the same beauty, the same intent, the same focus, the same ideas, remembering Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and subjugating your souls. Subjugating them in front of Allah, that I will put my head on the ground and bow down to you. That, Ya Allah, forgive me for even thinking about something else when I'm in front of you. The salah is a way for us to understand and to grow in our adab and our etiquette. As-salah mi'raj al-mu'min. Brothers and sisters, I think that, I wanted to leave you with some ideas because I'll probably talk to you forever about this topic. I love it so much. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open our hearts and give us a chance to grow in these principles and really have this deen enter into our hearts the way it was meant to be. Jazakumullah khairan wa aqulu qawli hadha wa astaghfirullah li wa lakum.
Dr. Jawad, Jazakallah khair for that insight. As we're going to do some Q&A, is that okay? As we do some Q&A, if you have any questions, you can just raise your hand, or if you want to redo anything in terms of his birthday, can you do this? Okay. And then just a reminder, while you're thinking of your question, tomorrow we have our community dinner that's celebrating the 25th anniversary of the Mantle of Muslim magazine. Tickets can be purchased online at miaonline.org, and there's still tickets available. Okay, I see there's a question on the sister side, Sister Tasneem.
So the question of Sayyidina Yusuf and how he approached his position when he said, make me.
Is this one okay? Okay. So
responsibility or a job that we know we can do well and we leave it. Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, he mentions in one of his fatawa that a person was asking whether he should leave a government or he should stay when it was the government of the Tatar. And he was told that it's either haram for you to stay or it's haram for you to leave. If you think someone better can come and take your position, you should leave. If you think that by you leaving, someone worse will come, you cannot leave. So the idea is that we have to know ourselves, and there should not be that sense of false humility. If we are the people to do that job and put ourselves forward, but the issue is not so much that; it's the sincerity of our hearts. Do we know that, and are we aware of that? And so every single time you have to فاستفتي قلبك, that you have to ask your heart that is this the right thing and the right thing for me. So I don't see a conflict in that. And living in this world نأخذ بالأسباب. We have experts in different fields. They have to take the responsibility in those fields and push the ummah and push the communities of those of other faiths. We have to push forward with whatever Allah gave us in terms of our expertise.
Jazakallah khair.
So the question: what advice can I give to youth in terms of becoming leaders in the community? The youth were the community. There's no concept in my mind that I've ever seen of something called a teenager. In Islam, like you're either a kid or you're an adult, right? There's no middle of the road. And this idea of teenagers, this arose actually after the Industrial Revolution. And what happened was that now people worked on the farms, they're moving towards an educated community. So there's this gap where one was older, they didn't have responsibilities at home, but they would study. So the size of an adult, the responsibilities of a child. This is antithetical to Islam. Imam Abu Hanifa, particularly for young men, said that once a child reaches is bulugh, when he reaches age of maturity, that there's no responsibility on the father to support them financially. They should, out of niceness. Now, of course, the daughter, my wife doesn't like this, but I tell her I support them till the day they die. It doesn't matter to me. So the daughters get the support forever, but the sons, as soon as they reach that age, then that's it. They're adults. Now, of course, support them. Of course, we want them to do well as fathers, as parents, and so on. But the idea that there's not a moment of time where one is an adult, but the responsibilities of a child, that doesn't exist. So leadership was the youth. Leadership was the youth. Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu an, he was, I think in his teenage years, 13, 14 years old, at Bayatul Aqaba, one of 13 people that invited Rasulullah to come now to Medina. He was a teenager at that time. And when he was sent to Yemen, he was in his mid-20s. That Ya Mu'az, go to Yemen. What's the project? Get on the back of this horse, go to Yemen and convert the entire country. Like that was the responsibility, with no resources, no money, no army, no nothing except the Quran and the Sunnah. That's it. So I think that, to me, in order to become leaders, it's not really a matter of leadership, because all of Islam is leadership. By being a Muslim, you're gradually increasing your ability as a leader. But it's the idea of taking those opportunities to lead. When things happen, leadership is not about everything's formed and everything's ready to go and now you take a title. It's when there's difficult times, when there's problems that people have not yet perceived, and you take leadership to make those things and correct those things and take those examples. I'll go even further with my feelings on this issue, that one does not grow until you hit a peak. Like, you don't grow as an individual until you do everything you can, you leave it on the table, and you don't get anywhere, right? You struggle in your studies and you still keep getting that B instead of that A plus. You keep working and struggling in some youth work, some community work, and it doesn't seem to go beyond a certain precipice. you struggle, but you do your best. You leave it on the table, everything you can possibly do. The idea that there's two types of nasr in this world. One is where Allah gave you hands and a mind and a brain, an eye, and you use it to its maximum ability. Don't think that's from you, that's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second type of help Allah gives is where it's divine. It comes and min haythu la yahtasibu. You don't even expect it. Scholars say that in order to access number two, maximize number one. Do everything you possibly can. At Badr, our Prophet did everything, organized, struggled, got his team together, and then Allah sent the angels. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helped. So the idea that you struggle. So one of my favorite verses I love in the Quran talking about this, it says, "الَّذِينَ جَاهَدُوا فِينَا لَنَهْدِيَنَّهُمْ سُبُلُنَا." That if you struggle in my way, I will surely guide you. I will guide you. But you got to put that struggle in. Leave it on the table. Whatever you have, put it forward and watch the transformation occur. And so I think to me, in order to rise as leaders, is see what the community needs, see what your family needs, see what your future is in terms of your goals for transforming the ummah in terms of your studies, and then really go and do everything you possibly can and make dua and watch Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala cause that to blossom and grow into things you never expected, you never dreamed of, giving you abilities and talents and so on. And this is the story of the Quran, the story of Islam, that particularly people when they're young, when they take this attitude, Allah changes their life trajectory, changes everything about them. It's a gift that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives specifically reserved for young people that take that attitude.
Yes, brother.
Practical steps in improving our character. What there's one book that I quoted a few times here that I love. It's called Madarij al-Salikin, بين منزلة إياك نعبد إلى إياك نستعين. That's by Imam Ibn al-Qayyim, and it's the growth of the person as one traverses the path. That was a commentary of a book by Imam al-Harawi called Manazil al-Sa'irin, which was a Sufi scholar, in which he commented on how one grows their character. And the idea is that, moving from one step to the next. In that book, he says that it's a matter now of Allah opening a door for you. And he says it starts by being a mukhbit, that you have to be someone with humility. Because if you have no humility and you think you know, then right then you don't know. That's the beginning of the path, they say. There's a verse in the Quran that is one of the scariest ayat for me in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about takabbur. And I remember I was giving a lecture where I misquoted the verse because I thought in Arabic it's majhul. So yusrifu an ayatiya. I thought it was, for some reason I memorized it incorrectly. I thought of it incorrectly. And the idea that the takabbur of an individual leads them to misguidance was how I understood it. That's not the verse. It says, سَأَسْرِفُ عَنْ آيَاتِيَ الَّذِينَ يَتَكَبَّرُونَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Allah says, I will own this. It won't be your jahl that'll misguide you. I will misguide you. The way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks in that ayah is terrifying to me. سأصرف عن آياتي الذين يتكبرون في الأرض بغير الحق. That somebody who is arrogant, I will make sure they're misguided, is what he's saying. Isn't that scary? Until we achieve a humility, that's what they say when we do tawbah, that's repenting to Allah. It starts by the tawbah of Allah. That's why He's a tawwab. He's the one who begins to put in your heart the idea that you have to do tawbah. Even that's a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your question's a mercy from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the idea that if on a practical level, we start with that basic building block, and then we start to think and grow. And the maqamat that are mentioned in that book is beautiful. How do you become a sabir? How do you become mutawakkil? How do you grow in your character and achieve these different maqamat? So that's my, I would say perhaps humble suggestion to the beginning point of our growth. Akhi, what is your name? Ibrahim. Okay, so Ibrahim, I'm going to tell you about my life, okay, in Winnipeg. And I was speaking to Ahmed about this, earlier, but I'd tell you about me. So you guys are here in this beautiful masjid, and I grew up at a time where the Saint Vital masjid wasn't in existence. People were praying out of churches and this and that and so on. And at that time, I had zero deen inside of me. If I came for Salatul Eid after fighting with my parents, maybe I would come for Salatul Eid. I didn't know how to read Al Fatiha. I didn't know anything at all. And I remember there's a man that insisted that I go to Islamic camp. I had no desire to go. And he said, you know what? There's basketball there. I said, you know what? I'm going to go. I don't know for basketball. I love basketball. So I went to the camp and I tasted Islam. That's the first time it wasn't logical. I stood up for Salah with the brothers and sisters, and I just absolutely fell in love with it. That was at the end of grade 7. So that's when I started to get that little idea. And at that point, I was embarrassed. I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to read Arabic. I didn't know anything about anything. And I went everywhere trying to learn. There was a wonderful sister, Sister Seda. She taught me how to read Arabic. And then a couple of friends were there. There was a student from Pakistan. He was teaching. There's some Jamaat al-Tabligh. They took me under their wing. But for some reason, I wanted to learn, and I didn't know where to learn. It was like, how do I do Salah? What are the actual words? How does this work? What are the meanings? I had a million questions, and I just kept looking, asking, and so on. That's when the teacher that affected me the most in my life was delivered to me like my father knows, it was delivered to me like out of nowhere. His name is Sheikh Muhammad Sanad. He comes to this city. His father is the director of Kulliyat al-Sharia in Azhar, and he's blind. So my teacher spent his life reading books to his father teaching him and telling him, you know enough, go do your PhD in engineering. Out of nowhere, this man lands in Winnipeg and he starts teaching me. I think I spent well over 10 years with him. We started 2 hours per week, then it went 6 hours per week. I would go to his house. We would read Fiqh Madahib al-Arba'a. We would read the books of Sirah, Tafsir. He'd teach me the sciences of Usul. And he taught me like every week. I'm getting a chance to learn from him. And I think back to my life and I said, how, like, on what basis was I exposed to that person? Maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had mercy on me as a young man that I wanted to learn, at that moment. And for me, there's nothing in my life. There's no studying. There's no gift. There's nothing more than what that, if a human being, there's no human being that gave me more than that man in terms of teaching me. And I'm still in touch with him and such a wonderful individual. But again, sitting in the middle of Winnipeg at that time, I described the events to you. Allah somehow, subhanahu wa ta'ala, opened a door for me. So I think that we cannot, the effort that Sayyidina Musa gave, when in the story I told, just think about it. He just started traveling. Go left, go right, go somewhere. I don't know where I'm going to go. I know Allah sees struggle. Man sa'a laha sa'yaha. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in everything in life, you're rewarded by your results. If you go to work, what are your results? You're rewarded, not your efforts. But Allah, He rewards your efforts. Man sa'a laha sa'yaha. That the one who strives and struggles for it. And it's a wonderful law of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that if we struggle, He opens these doors. And so that is my thing, that we stand up and pray in tahajjud, put our heads down, ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, open our hearts, and then spend time and effort and work and struggle, and the beauty of life will become more and more and more to us. And that's the opportunity we have. فَلَمَّا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ آتَيْنَاهُ حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا. That the young person who struggled and worked hard, even among the Anbiya, that when they achieved a point of strength, we gave them knowledge, we gave them wisdom, we gave them authority, we gave them everything that they needed, specifically for the youth. The books, there's on these topics, there's beautiful books. I mean, Uh, of course, there is the books of Imam Ghazali, and there's a book that I don't think people read enough, in which he wrote. It's called Jawahirul Quran, the jewels of the Quran. It's such an unbelievable book. Of course, as I mentioned, Madarij al-Salikin, I love that book as well. But and all the books of Imam Ibn al-Qayyim al-Fawaid and so many books, but there's nothing like learning these books by the hands of a teacher. You know, sometimes we can be misled or misguided by the internet and by Google and by this and by that. But if we're going to learn knowledge, it has to be in a structured way at the hands of a teacher who knows something and grows us and so on in our hearts. So that of course, I don't know the levels of all the people here, but it's important for us to recognize that even Sirat al-Mustaqim in Surah al-Fatiha is defined as Sirat al-Ladina an'amta alayhim. It's the Sirat of the people. Like Sirat al-Mustaqim is defined as the Sirat of the people that you had blessing on. So our deen is a deen of naql. It's a deen of transmission of knowledge from one to the next, all the way back to Rasulullah, all the way back to Jibreel, all the way back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So to cut that chain of narration and think we can learn on our own can sometimes be dangerous. So these books are beautiful books, but to be taught at the hands of scholars. You know. Wallahu a'lam.
All right, Jazakallah khair. If there's no other questions, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I'd like to thank especially Brother Dr. Jawad Shah. And remember, there's still tickets online if you need to get for tomorrow's community dinner. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.